So the next thing that we are going to implement, the next feature that we're going to implement is tiles to represent the walls of the game so that we can implement collision detection to prevent our player sprite from moving through the walls. And this is a more convoluted process. It's quite a complicated process because the first thing we have to do, we have to create the sprite to represent the wall and the object to represent the wall in the game. So that's the sprite to represent the image, the visuals of the wall, and the object to represent the actual wall within the game. We then need to create a new layer in our room and add these wall tiles to it so that we've covered this sort of hashed area here, which represents the walls in our maze or in our level. And once we've done that, we need to go into Object Player and we need to edit the movement code so as that when the player sprite collides with the walls, it stops moving. So I'm going to create, first of all, the sprite, and I'm going to go over to the sprites folder. Well, the first thing I'm going to do, actually, let's close the game off. I'm going to go over to the sprites folder. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to create sprite. And this sprite I'm going to call sprite wall. And then I'm going to edit this image rather than import it. So I'm going to click edit image. And what I want from the wall is I just want a plain black wall. So I'm going to click on the black color. I'm going to click the fill tool. I'm going to move it over, left click, and that's all I need to do about the wall. Perhaps when you've a bit more confidence, when you've got into the swing of things, you might make this wall a little bit more interesting, but for the time being, it's absolutely fine. I'm going to close that. I'm going to close the sprite. That's all we need to do for the time being. And then I'm going to go to Objects, right click, go to Create, Object, and I'm going to call this Object Wall. And where it says no sprite, just like we've done previously, I'm going to click on that and I'm going to assign my wall sprite. Now I'm going to add my tile objects to the room, to the level. So I'm going to close this object here. I'm going to click on this button here to bring the editor panel, the inspector panel over. And I'm going to go into rooms, expand. I'm going to click our level 1 room, bring it up here. Now, these, as I mentioned earlier, on the left-hand side at the top, are called layers. And layers are almost like individual drawers or folders into which you can put things and you can move them around in groups rather than individually. So layers, for example, they can be locked by using the padlock, or they can be made invisible. So if you'll notice, when I hide our instances layer, it hides our sprite, our player sprite. If I hide the background, it hides the level sprite, the background to the game. Now I'm going to create a separate instance for the tiles which the player can collide with, and I'm going to explain a bit later on why it's important to have a separate layer instance. I'm going to create a new instance layer. I'm going to click that button there. It comes up as instances _1. I'm going to right click it, rename, and I'm going to call it collision _tiles. I'm going to press enter. Now, with this layer selected, I'm going to move back to Object Wall. I'm going to drag an instance of Object Wall into the game, into the room. Now, as I mentioned, I want to cover all this hashed area, and I can do it by dragging individual pieces in one by one. But you can also, once you've added a sprite, you can also resize it. So I'm going to move that one and resize that one to there. Click on this one, I'm going to resize it to there. I'm going to click to hold down Control and press C to copy, then hold down Control and press V to paste. I'm going to move that one to the bottom. I'm going to drag in a new object wall. I'm going to stretch that, select it and stretch it. Press Control and C, Control and V, move it across to this side. Press Control and C, Control and V, and move it to there, and then I'm going to resize it. I'm going to just add one last instance, pop that in there, click it to select it and resize it. And now I've got all of my walls in place. So with the walls added into the collision tiles layer, it's now time to change the code in the player sprite to make sure that when it collides with the walls, it stops. And we're essentially going to replace all of the code that that was entered in the previous video. I'm going to click on Objects. I'm going to click on Object Player. And then you can see I'm going to press F12 to drop out, to hide all the docking menus. I can close Sprite Player here that's popped up. I'm going to sort of put this in the center. I'm going to click Maximize on my code. So we need to be in the step event. So if you're not in the step event, you need to double click in the step event. This is where you added the code in the last section. So double click in the step event, open the maximize the screen, and I'm going to zoom out here. I'm going to delete these one by one. Now you'll be asked if you want to confirm the deletion, which I do. If you check don't show this message again, you won't be shown the message, but just bear in mind that you may delete things accidentally. So I'm going to leave that message, that box unchecked. So this is perhaps the most complicated aspect of the whole game, and you don't need to understand it completely. You don't need to fully understand it. You just need to get it to work, is the long and short of it. So I'm going to add a declare temp command, and the temp is a temporary variable piece of information that lasts only as long as each step in this case. So every time the step runs, these variables are recreated. And I'm going to call it write. Then the value I'm going to add, and this needs to be typed in very carefully, is keyboard underscore check. And you'll see that this function box comes up here. I'm going to open my brackets and I'm going to put vk underscore write and close my brackets. And then I'm going to click off somewhere. And bearing in mind that this code needs to be added completely as you can see. So there can be no spelling errors, no rogue underscores or anything like that. It's got to be added exactly as I've added it there. And what this temporary variable does, it basically stores the value of the right arrow key, which will be 1 if it's pressed, 0 if it's not. I'm going to drag another declare temp. You can see here, it's while I've got this declare temp in the search box, it just remains. I'm going to drag another one in. This one I'm going to call left. And again, keyboard underscore check, open my brackets, VK left. And that's going to store the value of the left key. And I'm going to drag another temp variable, declare temp variable. This one I'm going to call up. The value I'm going to give it is keyboard underscore check VK up. And one last one, as you can probably guess, is down, is to cover the down key. So what we're doing here is we're storing the value of the keys as they are pressed. So if it's pressed, it will be one value. If it's not pressed, it will be another. We've still got a couple of temporary variables to add. I'm going to drag another temp variable across. This one I'm going to call X input, and I want the value of X input to be right minus left. Then I'm going to drag another one, and this is Y input. The value is going to be down minus up. And that is that down and that up. And what we are doing here, we're calculating which direction first of all, along the x-axis the player wants to move, and which direction along the y-axis that the player wants to move. So x-axis left to right, y-axis top to bottom. So I'm going to add one more box, which is move and, use my spelling, move and collide. And it's this one here, move and collide. I'm going to drag that in. And the object that I want to check the collision against is object wall. Because if you recall, we've now got the walls in place, and we want to check if we are going to collide with them. I've checked, just to show you that again. So I've clicked on the button to the right. I'm going to go into objects and click on object wall. Now the X direction is X input multiplied by 5, and the Y direction is Y input multiplied by 5. What's happening here? It's taking the value of these variables that we've declared, the values of these temporary variables, and it's applying a speed factor to it, which is, in this case, a speed factor of 5. But it's also checking whether or not we have collided with the wall. And what this function does, if movement is attempted and there is a collision, it stops and the player won't move. However, if there's no collision, it will move the player sprite along the x-axis and along the y-axis. So I'm going to click play and let's see how that's working. There we are. And you see the player sprite can still move around, but every time it hits the walls, it stops moving. And I'll just close the game and I'll just show you that code again. So that code is the code we use to check whether the player can move forward or whether they've collided with something that stops them. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to close the player event. And I'm going to go back to the room. And I'm going to bring the asset browser open. So I've got everything up and open. Now, the reason I've asked you to put the tiles in a separate layer is that if you don't want these plain black walls and you'd instead prefer to use the graphics of the background, if you left click and drag them to the bottom, they're hidden. They go below the background so they can't be seen. But they still work So later on, when you're creating a nice sort of background map, background image for your level, you can add your collidable tiles, but you can hide them out of the way where they can't be seen. But your collision code still works. In the next video, we're going to do something similar. We're going to add some collidable tiles, but these are going to be the tiles that are used to trigger the game over event. Basically, we're going to add the tiles that are the escape route out of ShapeWorld.